On a warm spring afternoon, the streets of the quiet suburban neighborhood were unusually still. Birds chirped softly, and a few kids rode their bikes along the sidewalks, laughing and calling out to each other. The sun was dipping low, painting everything in shades of gold. Amid the calm, a 16-year-old girl was walking home from school. She had a backpack slung over her shoulder, filled with textbooks and notebooks. Her hair swayed gently with each step, and she hummed a song softly to herself, enjoying the brief moment of peace before reaching the chaos of home. The girl had always been careful walking these streets. She knew which blocks were safe and which ones were best avoided. But today, nothing seemed unusual. She had her headphones in, listening to music that made her feel light and carefree. She barely noticed the occasional car passing by or the distant sound of construction work. Everything felt normal, ordinary, even safe. Suddenly, a patrol car slowed near the curb, pulling up beside her. The uniformed officer inside watched her for a moment before stepping out. He was in his early 40s, tall, with a stern look on his face that seemed almost carved from years of authority. His badge glinted in the sunlight, and his shoes clicked sharply on the pavement as he approached her. At first, she smiled nervously, thinking he might just be asking for directions or giving a friendly warning about crossing the street. But the way he looked at her, his eyes scanning her from head to toe, sent a chill down her spine. "Excuse me, young lady," he said, his voice firm. "I need to ask you a few questions." The girl's heart began to race. "Questions? About what?" she asked, trying to keep her voice steady. The officer didn't answer immediately. Instead, he stepped closer, invading her personal space. The warmth of the sun felt distant now, replaced by a cold, heavy weight pressing on her chest. She instinctively took a step back, her instincts screaming that something was wrong. "I didn't do anything," she murmured. "It's just a routine check," he replied. But the tone of his voice didn't match the words. There was something in the way he said it, something that made her feel smaller, vulnerable. Before she could react further, he reached out, grabbing her arm. It was firm, controlling, and she froze. Panic rose in her chest like a wave, threatening to pull her under. "Let go of me," she shouted, struggling against his grip. He didn't. Instead, he did something completely unexpected, something no one should ever do. He reached toward her skirt, lifting it without any reason or warning. The girl gasped, a sound torn between fear and disbelief. Her face turned crimson with embarrassment and terror. She tried to pull away, but his hand was steady, as if he had rehearsed this moment 1,000 times in his mind. Time seemed to stretch. Every second felt like a lifetime. She could hear her own heartbeat thundering in her ears. The music from her headphones was gone now, replaced by the harsh reality of the moment. She felt trapped, powerless, and completely exposed. Tears stung her eyes, but she refused to let them fall. She refused to give him the satisfaction of seeing her cry. When the officer finally released her, she stumbled backward, nearly losing her balance. Her legs shook uncontrollably. She clutched her skirt, pulling it down as fast as she could. The humiliation was unbearable. She wanted to disappear, to vanish from the world entirely. Her hands trembled, and her mind raced with questions. How could someone in uniform, someone sworn to protect, do this to her? What had she done to deserve this? She didn't wait to find out. Turning on her heel, she ran. Each step was fueled by a mix of fear and adrenaline. She didn't stop until she reached the safety of her home, her breath ragged and uneven. Her parents were in the living room when she burst through the door, her backpack dropping to the floor as she collapsed onto the couch. Her mother rushed to her side, wrapping her arms around her trembling daughter. "What happened?" she asked, her voice a mix of concern and rising anger. The girl could barely speak. Words caught in her throat, choked by shock and shame. Finally, she managed to whisper, "The police. He lifted my skirt." Her father's face went pale. The room filled with a heavy silence, the kind that makes every sound seem louder, more urgent. He knelt beside her, gripping her hands tightly. "We're going to fix this," he said firmly. "No one can get away with this. Not anyone." But even as he spoke, there was uncertainty in his voice. They had called the police department immediately, trying to report the incident, but every attempt seemed to hit a wall. Calls were transferred, messages went unanswered, and every conversation ended with vague reassurances that someone would look into it. The family felt frustration mounting alongside fear. Would the system, the very system that was supposed to protect, turn its back on them? Would they have to fight this battle alone? The girl stayed in her room that evening, her mind replaying the incident over and over. She felt the weight of shame and confusion pressing down on her, wondering why this had happened to her and what she could have done differently. She questioned everything: her choices, her safety, and her trust in people who were supposed to uphold the law. Outside, the neighborhood seemed unchanged, but she knew things were different now. The streets felt colder, the sunlight harsher. The innocence of her afternoon walk was gone, replaced by a harsh reality she hadn't been prepared for. She thought about the other kids who played outside, about the families who trusted the police, about the world that seemed safe on the surface but could hide dark moments beneath. Her parents tried to comfort her, but they were dealing with their own anger and helplessness. They wanted to protect her, to make the fear go away, but they could feel the limits of their power. They promised to stand by her, to pursue every possible avenue of justice, and to make sure that no one else would have to face what she had endured. But even as they spoke, the room was filled with tension, the kind that makes every minute feel like a battle. As night fell, the girl lay in bed staring at the ceiling. Sleep eluded her, chased away by the memory of the officer's hands, the violation, and the disbelief. Her thoughts wandered to questions of fairness, of justice, and of courage. How could one person, one act, disrupt so completely a life that had seemed ordinary and safe just hours before? She wondered if she would ever walk the streets without fear again, if she could trust anyone in uniform, or if she would always carry this shadow with her. But somewhere in the depths of her fear, a small spark of defiance flickered. She was terrified, yes, but she was also determined. She knew that she could not let this moment define her life, even if it had shaken her to her core. She resolved, silently, that she would speak out, that she would find someone to help her, and that she would demand justice no matter how difficult the path might be. Outside, the suburban neighborhood remained quiet. The wind rustled through the trees, carrying the faint scent of blooming flowers. Life went on, unaware of the small but significant struggle unfolding in one house. But inside that home, the stage was set for something bigger, for a story of courage and justice that was only just beginning. The girl's journey had started, a journey that would test her resilience, her strength, and her belief in the power of doing what is right. The events of that afternoon, as terrifying as they were, would mark the beginning of a fight, not just for her own safety, but for the principle of justice itself. After the terrifying afternoon, news of the incident began to spread quietly at first. Friends at school noticed that the girl seemed withdrawn, her usual cheerful energy replaced by a reserved, cautious demeanor. Teachers observed that she was unusually quiet, often staring out of windows or fidgeting with her backpack straps. Rumors began circulating, some accurate, some twisted, but she refused to speak at school, worried about judgment or disbelief. She felt trapped between wanting to tell someone and fearing what might happen if she did. Meanwhile, the girl's parents were determined not to let the matter fade away. They reached out to local community leaders seeking guidance. One of them, a well-known civil rights advocate in the neighborhood, had a reputation for taking on cases that others avoided. This woman, a black woman named Angela, had fought long battles against injustice in the city. Her name carried weight, respect, and a sense of safety for those who had nowhere else to turn. When Angela first received the call about the incident, she felt a mix of concern and determination. She knew the kind of challenges they would face. She had seen too many victims silenced by fear or ignored by the very people sworn to protect them. But she also knew that action could make a difference. Without hesitation, she arranged to meet the family at their home. Angela arrived one evening carrying a calm, assured energy that immediately put the family at ease. She greeted them warmly and listened as the girl's mother and father recounted every detail of the afternoon. The girl sat quietly, her hands folded in her lap, eyes darting nervously around the room. Angela spoke gently, encouraging her to share at her own pace, making it clear that she believed every word. The girl finally began to speak, her voice trembling at first, then growing stronger as Angela nodded in understanding. She described the patrol car, the approach of the officer, the sudden terror, and the humiliating act that had left her feeling exposed and powerless. She spoke about running home, about the fear in her parents' eyes, and about the uncertainty of how the authorities would respond. Angela listened with patience and empathy. She did not interrupt, did not question the girl's memory or perception. Instead, she validated her feelings, acknowledging the courage it took to speak the truth about something so deeply personal and painful. "You are not alone," Angela said softly. "This was not your fault. What happened was wrong, and we are going to make sure it is addressed. I promise you we will do everything we can." The family felt a mixture of relief and hope for the first time since the incident. Angela began to explain the steps they could take to seek justice. She talked about documenting the event, gathering witnesses, and filing complaints with the appropriate authorities. She explained the legal process in simple terms, breaking down complex procedures into manageable actions. Her presence gave them a sense of direction that had been missing, a roadmap through what felt like a confusing and intimidating system. Over the next several days, Angela returned multiple times. She helped the girl recount the incident in detail, ensuring every part of the story was accurate and clear. She worked with the parents to identify potential witnesses, people who had seen the girl walking home, shop owners who might have security footage, and even friends who had been with her before she encountered the officer. Each conversation, each plan was a step toward reclaiming the power that had been taken from the girl that afternoon. Angela also emphasized emotional support. She arranged for the girl to speak with a counselor who specialized in helping young people cope with trauma. They practiced strategies for dealing with fear, anxiety, and shame. Angela wanted the girl to feel safe and heard, not only for the upcoming legal battle but for her overall well-being. In addition to preparing the family for formal complaints, Angela began to use her network to gather information about the officer. She discovered previous complaints that had been quietly settled or ignored. She connected with journalists and activists who had experience exposing misconduct in law enforcement. Every piece of information was carefully documented, every contact meticulously noted. Angela knew that transparency and thoroughness were essential in building a strong case. The girl's confidence slowly began to grow. She started speaking up more at home, asking questions about the legal steps and expressing her thoughts about how she wanted to proceed. Angela encouraged this independence, emphasizing that her voice was central to the process. "Your story matters," Angela would remind her. "We will tell it together, and we will make sure people understand what happened." The community, initially unaware of the incident, began to notice subtle signs of activism. Angela organized small gatherings at local community centers to discuss safety and accountability. She shared general advice about how young people could protect themselves and how families could respond if confronted with misconduct. These meetings were not focused solely on the girl's case, but they created a supportive environment where others could come forward if needed. The girl and her parents felt a sense of solidarity, knowing they were part of a community that was willing to listen, support, and act. Meanwhile, tension between the family and the local police department continued to grow. The department's slow response and evasive answers were frustrating, but Angela encouraged patience and strategic action. She explained that building public awareness, gathering undeniable evidence, and creating pressure through community and media channels were all necessary to ensure the case could not be dismissed or ignored. Her guidance transformed the family's fear into focused determination. Angela also began mentoring the girl directly. They discussed ways to reclaim her confidence and sense of personal safety. They practiced speaking in public, telling her story without fear and maintaining composure in stressful situations. Angela's mentorship was more than legal strategy. It was about teaching resilience, self-respect, and courage. Each session helped the girl regain a piece of the power the officer had tried to take from her. As the days passed, small victories began to appear. The girl found her voice again at school, carefully but steadily, and started reconnecting with friends. Her parents, guided by Angela, felt empowered to navigate the bureaucracy of the police department and legal system. The family began to see that while the incident had caused trauma, it was also an opportunity to stand up, to demand accountability, and to inspire change in their community. Angela's presence and advocacy began to ripple beyond the immediate family. Neighbors who had heard whispers of the incident offered support, some sharing their own experiences of injustice. Local shopkeepers volunteered to check their security footage, hoping to provide evidence that could hold the officer accountable. Community leaders expressed solidarity, emphasizing that misconduct would not be tolerated and that the voices of victims would be amplified. Through it all, the girl began to understand the meaning of true courage. Courage was not the absence of fear. It was moving forward despite fear. She realized that with support, preparation, and persistence, she could face the injustice head-on. Angela's guidance, the support of her family, and the emerging backing of the community formed a protective shield around her, giving her strength she hadn't known she possessed. By the end of Part 2, the story had shifted from despair to determination. The girl was no longer alone, and the family had a clear plan for pursuing justice. The groundwork was being laid for a confrontation with the officer and the system that had initially failed them. The focus was on preparation, empowerment, and building a strong foundation for the fight ahead. Through Angela's mentorship and the family's courage, hope began to grow, setting the stage for the next chapter of the story where the struggle for justice would intensify and the true power of persistence and advocacy would shine. With Angela's guidance, the family began to take more concrete steps toward seeking justice. Each morning the girl woke up a little braver, a little stronger. Though the memory of the officer still haunted her. She could feel the weight of the afternoon he had humiliated her, but she also felt a new sense of determination. Every time she looked at her parents, she saw the same fire in their eyes, and it fueled her courage. The first major step was documenting everything. Angela sat down with the girl and her parents for hours, meticulously recording every detail they remembered. Angela stressed the importance of clarity and precision. The date, the time, the location, what had been said, the officer's physical appearance, even the way he moved and looked at her. All these details mattered. They wrote it down carefully, like pieces of a puzzle that needed to fit perfectly to make the truth undeniable. Next, they started identifying potential witnesses. There were a few neighbors who had been outside during the incident, and a convenience store nearby had a security camera that might have caught part of the encounter. Angela helped the family write letters to each potential witness, explaining the situation and requesting their cooperation. Some were hesitant at first, afraid of retaliation, but Angela reassured them that their statements could be anonymous if needed, and that standing up for truth was worth the risk. Meanwhile, Angela began preparing the family for the reactions they might face from the police department. She explained that initial resistance was common, that the department might try to minimize the incident or protect the officer. She also advised them on how to speak to officers or administrative staff professionally but firmly. Angela wanted them to be prepared for stonewalling without losing their composure or confidence. The girl also started meeting with a counselor, guided by Angela's recommendation. At first she was skeptical, not used to talking about her feelings so openly, but over time, the sessions helped her process the fear and humiliation she had experienced. The counselor introduced techniques for managing anxiety, breathing exercises for moments of panic, and ways to regain a sense of personal safety. Gradually, she felt a little more in control of her emotions, a little less trapped by the memory of the officer's actions. In the background, Angela used her network to gather information about the officer. She discovered that he had a record of previous complaints, some of which had been quietly resolved or ignored. This was a crucial piece of the puzzle, as it showed a pattern of behavior rather than an isolated incident. Angela shared this information with the family, emphasizing that they were not alone, and that the system, when pushed, could be held accountable. Angela also reached out to local journalists she trusted, explaining the situation and the importance of highlighting the abuse of power. She carefully framed the story without sensationalizing it, focusing on the facts and the need for accountability. The journalist promised to investigate discreetly, ensuring that the family's privacy would be protected while building public awareness. The girl's confidence continued to grow. With Angela's encouragement, she began practicing how to speak about the incident in a calm and factual way. They rehearsed how to answer questions, how to maintain her composure, and how to convey the seriousness of the situation without feeling overwhelmed. Angela emphasized that her voice was central, that her experience mattered most, and that she had the right to be heard. Days turned into weeks, and the process of gathering evidence and preparing the family for the next steps became routine. The girl learned the importance of documentation, of detail, and of persistence. Every witness statement collected, every letter sent, and every phone call made added strength to their case. Angela reminded them constantly that justice was often a slow process, but patience, preparation, and determination could tip the balance in their favor. The local community started noticing small changes too. Neighbors who had once remained silent began talking about safety and accountability. Some shared their own experiences of misconduct, creating a sense of solidarity that the family had not expected. Angela encouraged the girl and her parents to attend these community meetings, not only for support, but also to show that they were taking action and standing firm. The police department, sensing growing pressure, began a preliminary investigation. Officers called to take statements were polite but cautious, as if aware that the situation had the potential to escalate publicly. Angela advised the family to remain calm, to answer questions truthfully, and to avoid confrontation. She emphasized the importance of building a factual record that could not be disputed. Despite the progress, the family still faced moments of fear and doubt. The girl sometimes woke in the middle of the night, reliving the incident, imagining what could have happened if things had gone worse. Her parents worried constantly about her emotional state, her safety, and the possibility that the officer might retaliate. Angela addressed these fears directly, helping them plan safety measures, strategies for managing anxiety, and ways to maintain emotional resilience. Throughout this period, Angela remained a steady presence, balancing legal strategy, community outreach, and emotional support. She taught the girl and her parents that seeking justice was not just about punishing the wrongdoer. It was about reclaiming power, asserting dignity, and setting an example for others who might face similar circumstances. Her guidance was both practical and empowering, a combination that gave the family hope. The girl began to understand the larger context of what had happened. The officer's actions were not just a personal violation. They were part of a broader pattern of abuse of authority. Recognizing this gave her a sense of purpose. She was no longer just a victim. She was a participant in a fight for accountability, fairness, and systemic change. Angela helped her see that her courage could inspire others, that standing up against wrongdoing could create a ripple effect of awareness and action. As the investigation progressed, small victories emerged. Witnesses agreed to provide statements, security footage was confirmed to exist, and the local community began to rally in subtle but meaningful ways. These developments strengthened the family's resolve and reinforced Angela's message that persistence pays off, even when the system initially seems unresponsive or indifferent. The girl's school life, though still shadowed by the incident, began to stabilize. Teachers offered extra support, classmates showed empathy, and she found a few close friends who helped her feel less isolated. These small but significant developments helped her regain a sense of normalcy, reminding her that life could continue, even in the face of adversity. Angela continued to prepare the family for the confrontation ahead. She explained that the coming days and weeks would test their patience, strength, and resilience. The officer and the department might resist, deny, or attempt to discredit their story, but she reassured them that with thorough preparation, a clear record, and the backing of the community, they could face these challenges head-on. By the end of Part 3, the foundation for the family's fight for justice was firmly in place. Evidence had been collected, community support had begun to coalesce, and the girl's confidence had been steadily rebuilt. Angela's mentorship had transformed fear into determination, helplessness into strategy, and despair into hope. The stage was set for the next chapter, where the struggle for accountability would intensify, and the power of persistence and advocacy would begin to yield tangible results. Weeks had passed since the incident, and the quiet suburban neighborhood was beginning to notice subtle signs of tension and change. The girl and her family had grown stronger, but the shadow of what had happened still lingered. Angela had continued her tireless work, coordinating with lawyers, journalists, and community members, ensuring every detail of the case was carefully documented. The family felt a mixture of anticipation and anxiety as they prepared for a turning point in their fight for justice. Angela arranged a meeting with the local police department to formally present the evidence they had gathered. The family arrived early, their hearts heavy with uncertainty but bolstered by Angela's steady presence. The department's lobby felt intimidating, the walls echoing with a sense of authority and expectation. As they waited, Angela reminded them to stay calm, focused, and factual. She emphasized that their preparation was their strength. When the meeting began, Angela led the conversation, presenting the details of the incident, the timeline, and the evidence. Witness statements were laid out clearly, and the security footage from the nearby store was referenced as critical proof. The department representatives listened carefully, their expressions guarded but attentive. For the first time, the family sensed that their persistence was forcing the system to take notice. The officer in question was called in for questioning, and the girl had to recount her experience once again. This time she felt more confident, speaking clearly and calmly, guided by Angela's coaching. Every word she said was deliberate, every detail precise. She realized that the power she had lost that day could be reclaimed through truth and courage. As she spoke, her parents felt a surge of pride mixed with protective concern, knowing how much courage it had taken for her to speak out. After the meeting, the department acknowledged the seriousness of the evidence. An internal investigation was officially launched, and the officer was suspended pending further review. Angela emphasized that this was only the beginning, but it was a significant victory. The family felt a mixture of relief and cautious optimism. Their actions were starting to make a difference, and the truth was finally being acknowledged. Meanwhile, Angela continued her efforts to raise public awareness. She worked with journalists who had been following the story, sharing the facts without sensationalism. Articles and news reports highlighted the importance of accountability, emphasizing the steps being taken to investigate misconduct. The community began to rally more openly, offering support and solidarity to the girl and her family. Neighbors attended meetings, shared their experiences, and encouraged a broader dialogue about safety and justice. The girl continued her counseling sessions, which helped her navigate the emotional ups and downs of the process. She learned techniques to manage anxiety, face fears, and maintain her composure. Each session reinforced her growing sense of self-worth and resilience. She realized that the incident, though traumatic, had awakened a sense of determination within her. She wanted to ensure that what happened to her would not happen to anyone else. Angela also organized community workshops on personal safety and legal rights. These workshops created a space for young people and families to learn about protection, reporting misconduct, and advocating for justice. The girl and her parents attended, not only for support but also to contribute. Sharing their experience in a controlled environment allowed them to reclaim some control over the narrative and inspire others to stand up against wrongdoing. As the internal investigation progressed, additional witnesses came forward, corroborating the girl's account. Angela carefully collected and verified each statement, ensuring it could withstand scrutiny. The presence of multiple witnesses strengthened the case, making it increasingly difficult for the officer or the department to dismiss the incident. The family felt their efforts validated, knowing that truth and persistence were producing tangible results. During this time, the officer began to realize that the situation could no longer be ignored. His denial became less confident as the evidence mounted. Angela, anticipating potential resistance, coached the family on how to remain composed during interactions with him. She emphasized that their focus was on facts and accountability, not personal confrontation. This approach helped the family maintain dignity and credibility, ensuring that the spotlight remained on justice rather than emotion. The community support continued to grow. Local residents organized peaceful demonstrations advocating for accountability and the protection of young people. Social media campaigns amplified the story, encouraging others to speak up about misconduct and abuse of power. Angela highlighted the importance of these actions, showing that collective voices could influence change, even when the system seemed slow to act. The girl, now more confident, began to participate in public discussions and workshops. She shared her experience in a measured, articulate manner, emphasizing the need for awareness and accountability. Each time she spoke, she felt a sense of empowerment, transforming her fear into action. Her parents watched with pride, seeing their daughter evolve from a victim into a strong, courageous advocate. The turning point came when the security footage from the convenience store was reviewed publicly by investigative journalists. The video, though brief, clearly supported the girl's account. The evidence was undeniable. The officer's actions could no longer be denied or downplayed. Angela used this moment to press for formal charges and ensure that the investigation continued with transparency and integrity. As the pressure mounted, the police department had no choice but to act decisively. The officer was formally charged with misconduct, and disciplinary proceedings were initiated. The community responded with relief and applause, recognizing that accountability had been achieved through persistence, preparation, and courage. Throughout this process, Angela continued to provide emotional support to the girl and her family. She reminded them that justice was not only about punishment, but also about healing and empowerment. She encouraged the girl to continue her counseling, to engage with the community, and to maintain her focus on positive change. By the end of Part 4, the story had reached a pivotal moment. The evidence was undeniable. The officer had been held accountable, and the community had rallied behind the family. The girl had reclaimed her voice, her confidence, and her sense of safety. Angela's guidance had transformed fear into action and determination into tangible results. The stage was set for the final chapter, where justice would be fully realized, lessons would be learned, and the impact of courage and advocacy would resonate far beyond the neighborhood. The day the final hearing began, the girl, her parents, and Angela arrived at the courthouse early. The building loomed large, imposing, and intimidating, yet it also symbolized the place where truth and justice could prevail. The family felt a mixture of anxiety, relief, and anticipation. They had come so far, and the culmination of their efforts would finally be tested. Inside, the courtroom was filled with people observing the proceedings. Community members, neighbors, journalists, and supporters had come to witness accountability in action. Angela guided the family to their seats, reminding them to stay composed and confident. The girl took a deep breath, feeling the weight of the past weeks settle into a determined resolve. When the proceedings began, the officer in question appeared, his demeanor guarded. He had been suspended and was now facing formal charges for misconduct. As the hearing progressed, the girl was called to give her testimony. With Angela's guidance in mind, she spoke clearly, calmly, and with honesty. Every detail, every moment of fear and humiliation was described in a way that left no doubt about the truth of her experience. Witnesses were called to corroborate her account. Neighbors who had seen her walking that afternoon, the convenience store owner who confirmed the security footage, and friends who had spoken with her immediately afterward all testified. Each testimony strengthened the case, creating a clear, undeniable picture of what had occurred. The girl's parents watched with pride, knowing that their family's perseverance and courage were finally being recognized. Angela addressed the court, emphasizing the importance of accountability and the broader message of the case. She spoke about the need to protect young people, uphold justice, and ensure that misconduct by those in positions of authority would not be tolerated. Her words resonated deeply, not only with the courtroom but with the wider community following the case through media coverage. The officer attempted to defend his actions, offering explanations and denials. However, the overwhelming evidence, including witness statements and video footage, left little room for doubt. The testimony was consistent, precise, and compelling. The officer's attempts to minimize or justify his behavior were met with careful scrutiny, and the court recognized the gravity of his misconduct. After hours of proceedings, the judgment was finally announced. The officer was found guilty of misconduct and faced disciplinary action, including the permanent loss of his position. The courtroom erupted in quiet relief and applause from the supporters present. Justice had been served, and the girl's courage, along with the unwavering support of her family and Angela, had made it possible. The family stepped outside the courthouse into the sunlight, taking in the fresh air and feeling a profound sense of relief. They had faced fear, uncertainty, and systemic obstacles, yet they had persevered. The girl felt a deep sense of empowerment, knowing that her voice had been heard, her experience validated, and the wrongdoer held accountable. Angela embraced the family, congratulating them on their bravery and resilience. She reminded them that their actions had ripple effects, showing the community and the world that standing up for justice, no matter how daunting, was possible and necessary. The family thanked Angela, knowing that her guidance had been instrumental in every step of the journey. In the days and weeks following the verdict, the community continued to respond positively. Local organizations and schools began implementing programs to educate young people about personal safety, rights, and how to respond to misconduct. The family participated in discussions and workshops, sharing their story to inspire others and provide practical advice. The girl, once a victim of fear and humiliation, became a symbol of courage and resilience in her community. The family also took time to focus on healing. Counseling sessions helped the girl process the lingering trauma, build confidence, and strengthen her emotional resilience. She learned that recovery was not about forgetting what had happened, but about integrating the experience into her life as a source of strength. Her parents continued to support her every step of the way, proud of the young woman she was becoming. As life returned to a new sense of normalcy, the family reflected on the journey they had endured. They understood that justice was not a simple or immediate process, but a combination of courage, persistence, and community support. The girl had transformed from a frightened teenager into a confident young advocate, empowered to face the world with resilience and integrity. The neighborhood also experienced subtle but meaningful changes. Awareness of misconduct and the importance of accountability had increased. People were more vigilant, more willing to speak up, and more determined to protect one another. The case had set a precedent, showing that truth, courage, and support could prevail against abuse of power. The girl often thought back to that warm spring afternoon when everything had changed. The fear and humiliation she had felt seemed distant now, replaced by a sense of empowerment and purpose. She knew that her experience had shaped her, but it no longer defined her. She had reclaimed her voice, her dignity, and her sense of safety. Angela continued to mentor the girl, emphasizing the importance of using her experience to inspire positive change. Together, they worked on community projects, educational programs, and advocacy initiatives, ensuring that the lessons learned from the incident would benefit others. The girl understood that her journey was not just about personal healing, but also about contributing to a safer, more just world. By the end of Part 5, the story had reached a powerful and uplifting conclusion. Justice had been served, the family had grown stronger, and the community had been inspired by courage and persistence. The girl had emerged not only as a survivor, but as a symbol of empowerment and resilience. The experience, once a source of fear and pain, had transformed into a story of hope, accountability, and the enduring power of human determination to confront injustice and create meaningful change. Months had passed since the courtroom victory, yet the impact of the incident continued to shape the girl's life. The lessons she had learned, the courage she had shown, and the support she had received had created a foundation for her personal growth. Life had returned to a sense of normalcy, but with a deeper awareness of the importance of justice, community, and resilience. The girl continued her counseling sessions, focusing on long-term emotional healing. She explored her feelings more deeply now, examining not only the fear and humiliation she had experienced, but also the strength and resilience she had discovered within herself. These sessions helped her understand that trauma could coexist with empowerment, and that reclaiming her voice had changed her perspective on life. She realized that her experience, though painful, had given her tools to navigate future challenges with confidence. At school, she had gradually regained her confidence. Teachers and classmates noticed her quiet strength, the way she handled herself with maturity and poise beyond her years. Some students approached her to ask questions about the case not out of curiosity, but to understand how to respond to fear or harassment. She shared her insights cautiously, always emphasizing the importance of safety, self-respect, and speaking out against wrongdoing. Angela remained a key figure in her life. The mentorship continued, evolving from crisis management to guidance in advocacy and community engagement. They collaborated on educational workshops and outreach programs, teaching young people how to protect themselves, how to recognize abuse, and how to report misconduct safely. The girl began to take a leadership role, speaking at local schools and community centers, her voice now a symbol of resilience and hope. The family also saw changes in their community. The incident had sparked conversations about safety, accountability, and the importance of support systems. Neighborhood meetings, once casual and social, now included discussions about safeguarding young people and responding to misconduct. Local authorities implemented additional training for officers and staff, emphasizing ethics, boundaries, and proper conduct. The changes were small but significant, creating a safer environment for everyone. The girl's relationship with her parents had strengthened. They had weathered the storm together, facing fear, frustration, and uncertainty. The shared struggle had deepened their bonds, creating a sense of mutual respect and understanding. Her parents admired her courage and determination, and she, in turn, recognized the sacrifices and support they had given throughout the ordeal. As time went on, the girl found ways to integrate her experience into her personal growth. She began journaling, writing about her feelings, the lessons learned, and her goals for the future. This process helped her process lingering emotions and provided a creative outlet for reflection. Writing became a source of empowerment, allowing her to articulate her thoughts and feelings in a structured, meaningful way. Angela continued to encourage community engagement. Together, they organized events focused on youth empowerment, safety education, and advocacy training. The girl took an active role in planning, speaking, and mentoring others. She discovered that helping others navigate challenges similar to hers brought a sense of fulfillment and purpose. She realized that her journey could inspire change far beyond her immediate circle. The community's response remained overwhelmingly positive. Parents and educators expressed gratitude for the awareness and guidance provided. Young people, particularly girls, began to feel more confident about setting boundaries, speaking out, and seeking help when needed. The ripple effect of one person standing up for justice had grown, impacting dozens, even hundreds of lives. The girl also became more involved in local civic activities. She attended city council meetings, joined youth advocacy groups, and participated in campaigns promoting safety and accountability. Her experiences gave her a unique perspective, one grounded in real-life challenges and triumphs. She spoke with authenticity, her voice resonating because it was informed by courage and lived experience. Her academic life flourished as well. The focus and discipline she had developed during the ordeal translated into her studies. Teachers noticed her diligence and determination. She approached school projects with a sense of purpose and confidence, often drawing inspiration from the lessons of resilience she had learned. Her parents took pride in her achievements, understanding that the growth she had experienced was as important as any grade or award. Despite the progress, there were still moments of reflection and vulnerability. The girl occasionally thought back to that spring afternoon when her world had shifted. Instead of fear, she now felt gratitude for the support she had received, for the guidance of Angela, and for the opportunity to transform a painful experience into meaningful change. She understood that true strength came not from avoiding challenges, but from facing them and using the lessons learned to empower herself and others. The relationship between the family and Angela continued to flourish. Beyond advocacy, Angela had become a trusted mentor, guiding the girl through adolescence with wisdom, encouragement, and compassion. Together, they celebrated successes, navigated setbacks, and explored new ways to contribute to the community. Angela emphasized the importance of sustained engagement, reminding the girl that justice, empowerment, and positive change are ongoing processes. As the girl matured, she reflected on how the incident had shaped her character. The fear and vulnerability she had experienced had taught her empathy, awareness, and the value of speaking out. She recognized the importance of community, mentorship, and solidarity in confronting injustice. These lessons, though born from pain, had become cornerstones of her identity. By the end of Part 6, the girl had fully embraced her role as an advocate, a mentor, and a resilient young individual. Her journey illustrated the transformative power of courage, persistence, and support. From victim to survivor to empowered young leader, she had navigated fear, injustice, and trauma to emerge stronger, wiser, and committed to making a difference. The story demonstrated that true justice goes beyond punishment. It involves healing, growth, and the creation of positive change that extends far beyond the individual, touching the lives of many in meaningful and lasting ways.